Shakiki Giles Bayton. Jesse Ray. So, did everyone have a chance to look over our minutes from the December 4th meeting?
I got 2 things.
Okay.
So I was listed as absent and present, and I was present. And so my name was also spelled wrong as present. And then on page 4, it just says NO, so I think that should be Dr. Armstrong at the very bottom.
Dr. Armstrong, thank you.
Other than motions and seconds, I think everything else looks good.
All right, we have a motion, Asante. And do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Yeah. All those in favor of approval pending the amendments that were identified of our December 4th meeting minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those abstaining. All right.
Thank you all for those who completed the meeting surveys. Again, I read these to make sure that we can keep these meetings improved. So if you want your voice heard, I appreciate your participation in the survey. And if you just want to reach out to me or send me suggestions, you may do that as well.
Question. Joyce Harrison. How many people did do the survey?
I think it was 4 or 5.
I know, but I want to enter it into the record.
It looks like 3
Thank
people
you. Thank you.
completed the survey.
Thank you.
That did or didn't?
Did.
Only completed it.
Oh,
Which means that any feedback that I get is coming from 3 people. If you have additional feedback and it's not reflected on the survey, that type of feedback won't be implemented because I didn't receive it. Thank you. So we'll keep moving forward, you all, if no one has any questions. Our objectives today, we have 3. We're going to hear from the city and county with some updates in a second. Then we have a presentation on the harm of the and then we also will have a brief discussion on the follow-up around community engagement by the Racial Justice Coalition. So we will go ahead and move forward with city and county updates.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Brenda Mills with the City of County, with the City of Asheville, City and County, City of Asheville. I know where I work. First, well, before I forget, you had a vacancy on the commission, which was left by Kamari Macon, who left in September. I am pleased to say that Osana McPeters was appointed as a full commissioner with voting rights by the City Council January 9th. So just want to
All right.
I want to thank Osana for his, he's been here since the beginning, so we appreciate that. I also want to respond to the extension request that you got from the city and county. There's two pages and 2 documents. One from the county, which Dr. Noel Armstrong presented to you last meeting, and then I'm going to go over ours. So basically, city staff, we provided an extension request to the city council at their agenda briefing on December the 7th. On December 12th, your chair and vice chair, Dr. Mullen and Ms. Luana Little, discussed the extension request to the city council at their meeting. And where we landed, after some questions and answers, and I think they did a generally good job in just giving some feedback about where you guys are. We believe that you're making excellent progress on finalizing your draft recommendations. All the impact focus area draft recommendations will be presented to the full commission by February. So we had to delay housing today, but we will get everybody in by next month. So most of the meeting will be for that. And that given that the results of the cease to harm audit won't be available to the end of next month, they want to see, City Council asked that they see the results from the cease to harm audit. Want to kind of see where you are with the recommendations, and then also what results you get from the community engagements once we're going out with more formalized recommendations. So, and that, we would just want to continue to reiterate that we are supportive of anything that you do. We'll be here. They decide it's June, fine. If not, city staff is still supportive of whatever ends up happening. So that's for me. And then Rachel Wood, our assistant city manager, is going to come up for more announcements. Thank you.
Brenda, will you stay up there? Oh. So, good evening, everyone. Rachel Wood, assistant city manager. I've got some exciting and bittersweet news to share with all of you. I'll start with the exciting news, and that is introducing a familiar face to all of you in a new capacity effective January 8th. Salah Benaya-Mirat, who I know has been close to the reparations effort for several months, actually since its onset in July 2021, is now the City of Asheville's Director of Equity and Inclusion. So, a national search process, and Salah came out as our undisputed top candidate. So we're so glad to have Salah officially a part of the City of Asheville. Of course, the bittersweet part of this news is because we have a new Director of Equity and Inclusion, that means that the wonderful Brenda Mills is retiring after 18 years with the City of Asheville, 33 years of public service. She's actually worked for both the county and the city. So when she said Brenda Mills with the county and city, that was kind of right a little while ago. But Brenda has worked tirelessly, as you all know, on this reparations effort, and want to have an opportunity to thank her for her service to the community, more specifically to the reparations effort. And we know Brenda's going to stay in the community and work with us in different capacities, but she will no longer, after this meeting, be sitting at the table. So Brenda, thank you for your work. I've loved working with you, and I know we've all benefited from your hard work and dedication to the community.
No. All right, you all. Thank you, City and County, for your update. Brenda, congratulations. Salah, congratulations. So, two big things to celebrate. You all, we have the Carter Group here to give a preliminary presentation of their findings from an audit that they have been conducting. And what I want to say before I bring them up, a couple things. One, this is a lot of information. There's going to be tons of questions that you have. You may have clarifying questions. You may want to add suggestions, but it's a lot of information, and they have requested that we hold our questions to the very end. That is hard, and so what Salah has created for everyone has this packet in front of you, and each page represents a specific section that the Carter Group is going to be going through. So what we ask you to do as your questions come to you, write them down. So the first page is dedicated to education. The second page is dedicated to health and wellness. I will say these are not necessarily in order of the presentation, so just make sure you find the appropriate category for where you're writing your questions. I know it's going to be challenging to not ask your questions at the time, but we do want to honor what they have requested so they get through all of the information that they have to present to us. And so with that said, I will turn it over to the Carter Group. Can we give them a round of applause?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How are y'all doing?
Yes.
That's good.
Presentation thing, yes.
This is an exciting moment. We're happy to be here. My name is Dr. Adrian Carter. I have 23 years of experience dealing with racial equity work I know I look about 30 years old, and I'm okay with that young. Yeah, I started when I was about 9, so we'll go with that. Congratulations to Brenda for your years of service, and thank you for being a part of this process with us, as she has been, along with Dr. Noriel, working with us from a project management standpoint, and we appreciate you for that. Salah, congratulations as well.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here and to present our team who has been working on this project on all of the 5 IFAs and all the additional areas. We're going to go through this information. I want us to be relaxed, and we are one community. We see ourselves as a part of this work with you. And my goal is to get to your questions. And I could tell you the order that we're going to start with is going to be economic development first. So I'll get into the depth of the presentation. So that you can at least go to that page, and I'll prime you. So as mentioned, this is preliminary. These are our preliminary findings, which means that we're still in the process. And then about next month and a half, we'll go through that process. Our different team members from the Carter Development Group who've been working on this project will come up at different points throughout the presentation to continue on with their particular area. But I do want to introduce them so that you just have some familiarity with them. I'm actually going to start with, for our economic development team, I do want to first acknowledge Dr. LaShawna Wiggs. She was here with me the first time in August, but she's not here today, but she has been, she's the project manager on this, as well as the lead for economic development. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well, and so she's not here, but we do want to acknowledge her. I'm also joined by her co-researcher, who's Adrian Hibbert. She has 10 years of experience in business development, communication, marketing, and branding. The quote she lives by is, "The art of communication is the language of leadership." Ms. Hibbert, can you just stand up and let them see who you are? Okay. We're also joined for education by Jennifer Felton. Jennifer, can you just wave to the people so they know who you are? Jennifer is an education enthusiast. She has 20 years of experience in education, school improvement, and teacher development. Her philosophy is that all children want to learn. And as an educator myself, I've also worked in education. I can tell you she does a lot of mentoring as well and strongly believes that all children want to learn. We're also joined by our housing person, research team, Beverly Cooper. She is the owner operator of BRC Consulting. She has 30 plus years of local government experience, the last 15 working in affordable housing industry. And she says, be kinder than necessary.
All right.
Okay.
Amen.
We're also joined by one of her co-researchers, who's Jonathan Moses. He is the chairman of the Miami-Dade Millennial Board. He leverages over a decade of experience in government, community relations, and development to share policies centralized on housing, transportation, and economic development. He's unfortunately a graduate of Florida Atlantic Mechanical University, but we won't hold on against him. Yes. See, you shouldn't have wrote that down. I'm just saying, you should have just let that down. We're also joined by our health and wellness, one of our health and wellness researchers. Her name is Ashley Carter. She's a registered dietitian with a master's in nutrition, 12 years in public health, and food, and focuses on food insecurity, nutrition, and health prevention. Her quote is, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." For our criminal justice team, we are joined by Dr. Walters McDaniels, who is a PhD candidate in conflict analysis and resolution. He is a professor of criminal justice at Benedict College. He's also served and is a retired officer after 25 years of service, 17 years as a homicide sergeant and collaboration liaison between the Richmond County Sheriff Department and the United States Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights Division. And you are also joined by his research partner, who's Ricky LeBrun, who has 20 years of criminal justice experience. He has helped to implement the Thinking for Change program in South Florida, which is to help push back on recidivism. So thank you all. Those are our team that are going to be here to go through the different areas along with myself. We're going to talk about our approach and our methodology. We're going to spend some good time there so that you all have a robust understanding of how we've taken on this work, what we're looking at, why we're looking at it the way that we are. From there, we'll go into our key harm preliminary findings. Then we'll go into each of the IFA preliminary findings, some of our preliminary recommendations, and then some next steps. And we'll also have Q&A at the end of that. Y'all with me so far? Everything's good? All right. So as you all know, the purpose of this study is a comprehensive examination of the county and city government's alignment with municipal, state, federal regulations, statutes, and whatnot. And specifically, we are looking at how harm has been caused to the African American people and how it has been ceased. As you all are on the precipice of this historic approach to reparations with your Community Reparations Commission and the joint efforts between the city and the government, the city and the county governments, we know that this is the first known audit of this nature funded by a municipal and county government. And so what we're really doing is we're baselining. So this audit ends up serving as a baseline for us to grow from as you look to implement different strategies for the cessation of harm. Our firm is a solution-oriented firm. So I'm going to ask for you to repeat after me. When I say it's not the problem that counts, you're going to say it's the solution. Can y'all do that for me? It's not the problem that counts.
It's the solution.
One more time. It's not the problem that counts.
It's the solution.
So we are strongly focused on being solution-oriented, right? I have a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution. I solve problems. I'm community-focused, people-focused, and at the end of the day, I am solution-focused. So that is what drives our firm. So we are about solving the problem. So it's not the problem that counts.
It's the solution.
In order to do that, we're powered by a value system that we work with, which is called the Ellison model. And the Ellison model is a social development tool, and it focuses on some very basic principles, which are what we learned when we were, first, second grade, hopefully you learned that. But it's care, share, love, trust, honor, and respect. And those are the principles and the foundations that we operate by in all of the work that we do. It's not just flowerful words, if you will, but we do tie care, share, love, trust, honor, and respect to actual outcomes for how we provide service and how we work with our clients, but also how our clients infuse these principles in the work that they do. Both governments have caused harm and have indicated their willingness to address those harms. And so, again, we are being solution focused. So let's talk about how we've gone about this work. We're going to look at our methodology. We're going to talk about the impact focus areas. We're going to look at some definitions, the project phases, the metrics, and a harm compass. So we know that you have what I call the Power Five areas for the IFAs. And as part of our audit and study, we also look at internal workforce and the equity, inclusion, and human rights offices, both in the city and the county. Now, as mentioned, this is a preliminary presentation. So recommendations includes actions both the government can undertake within their current service delivery and opportunities. And that's important because our goal and our responsibility are what are city and county government programs, services, and how can our study inform them how to do their jobs better and help to cease harm for the African American community. So the findings today are preliminary, and our hope is that based on your questions and your input, that we're able to gain more information from you and some feedback to help guide our next steps. And the goal of the harm audit is to aid you all in your work So from our recommendations, you'll be able to build on top of that work to include it in the work that you are doing as you move forward. So what is a harm audit? It's similar to an equity study or an equity audit. It's a comprehensive assessment of an organization's policies, practices, programs, and outcomes to identify and address disproportionality, disparities, marginalization, and inequities. And the findings of a harm audit can inform targeted interventions and policy changes to create a more equitable and just environment. And so to the right, you see are some key terms that we use in going through our study. We're looking at disproportionality, disparity, marginalization. Our project is framed over looking at information from a 3-year time span. We look generally from when the reparations resolutions were enacted or approved up until the summer of 2023. So we're looking at around July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2023. So we've concluded our data collection phase. We've concluded our data analysis phase, and we're here, what you see in green, at the preliminary presentation. After this, we're going to circle back with the county and the city and the different IFAs and the research teams, and we're going to do some review meetings, talk some more about what our findings have been, and then we'll work toward getting to the final report, to finalize our recommendations, finalize the report, and then do the final presentations. As part of the process so far, we've held about 18 cohort meetings. And by that meaning that we've conducted meetings across the city and the county with their different departments. We've looked at and reviewed about 1,000 artifacts, probably about 400 dealing with economic development, which means documents, policies, procedures, reports from the grant funds that, if you receive grant monies, then you have to fill out that report and send it back to the city or the county. We looked at that information. We even developed a survey to get more information. So we've looked at quite a number of documents. We are anywhere between 50, 60, 70 recommendations, approximately. And I say that's moving because as we wind things down, synthesize information, but we are looking, if you take just 10 recommendations per category of the big 5, that's already 50. Right? And we looked at 7 areas. Overall, we assess the project based on very specific metrics, right? When we went in to say, hey, where's harm being done? We wanted to look at very specific areas that harm may or could potentially be occurring. So in criminal justice, we looked at recruitment and training procedures. We looked at traffic stops and searches, alternative sentencing programs. In economic development, we look at small business development, access to financing, and across the board, you see the other areas that we have for education, healthcare, and housing. So a total of about 35 metrics were assessed across the 7 focus areas. Now, because this is also an audit/research study, that means we can also go back and forth with data, collecting more data, analyzing more data, hosting more cohort meetings in order to get clarification on information as we wind down to those recommendations and final report. I want to introduce to you what we refer to as the Cease Harm Audit Compass. This particular compass is what we have been using to guide our work. And it asks a simple question. What are the opportunities? What's the representation? What's the knowledge? And what is the levels of access that is provided by the county and the city governments? So what does that mean specifically? So when you look at opportunity, we're looking at what programs, services, resources, and pathways that support the quality of life for residents, in this particular case for African Americans. So we want to know, what programs do you have? What services, what pathways, what resources are you providing? Once we get that information, we want to know about representation. We want the demographic data of the program, service, and resource benefactors. We want to know who is utilizing those services. We also want to know knowledge. What outreach campaigns to raise awareness about those services and programs and resources exist? How do people know about these? And then lastly, Access. Processes that provide equitable access to program services and resources. But there's an interesting outcome in all of this. This is what you're looking at are just the names of each of those categories, which we affectionately refer to as OKRA, for all of the roots, historic roots that it has for the Black community. There are 4 essential questions that we're asking. Okay? So remember, we have opportunity, we have representation, we have knowledge, and we have access. So the first essential question is, what is the result of opportunity minus representation? What happens when the opportunities, the programs, the services, they exist, but you don't have the representation of African Americans in that? The second question we asked ourselves is, what is the result of knowledge? You know about the program, but the representation is not there. So what is the result of knowledge minus representation? Third, what is the result of knowledge minus access? You know about the program, but it's inaccessible to you. Okay. Siri wanted to answer that question. Number 4, we ask, what is the result of opportunity minus access? You have an opportunity, you have a program, a service, but you don't have access to it. So those questions do have a result. When you have opportunity, but you don't have representation, you have disproportionality. When you have knowledge, you know about it, but you don't have representation, you have underutilization. When you have access, when you have knowledge, but you don't have access to it, you know it exists, but you know that you can't access it. You're not allowed there. That's not for you. Then you have exclusion.
That's right.
And then when you have opportunity, the programs or service that exist, but you don't have access, you have inequity. So in the process of our study, those are the 4 driving questions that we have. What happens when there's opportunity minus representation, knowledge minus representation, knowledge minus access, and opportunity minus access? In other words, where does disproportionality exist? Where does underutilization exist? Exclusion and inequity. Also, where are the opportunities? Where's the representation? Where's the knowledge? Where's the access? So this is the compass that we use in order to conduct our assessment and gain an understanding of all of those artifacts and the data that we're looking at. Before I move on to the next one, I will pause here quickly. Are there any questions about this?
I have one about the specificity of, when you talk about organizations, opportunities, does this assume that that services are to be provided in a unilateral direction or a transactional direction? Or is it also assuming that I guess I'm just asking you in short, is this the assumption that there are no exterior organizations or Black-led organizations who can provide access to these services? Because it seems like this is is it internal right now?
It is internal.
Okay, good, okay.
So let's go ahead and jump into these findings from our study. So we're going to share with you 5 key harm findings that we've had, and then we'll begin to go into each of the IFAs. So this is the order that we're going to use. So we'll have economic development first, after we talk about the major key findings. Then we'll go into education, then housing, health and wellness, criminal justice, and then we'll talk about the last 2 dealing with the internal workforce and the equity officers. Okay, but there's a slide that leads into each of them, so don't try and remember the order. Okay, I got you. So major findings that we've came across is that within the county and city government, respectively and collectively, there's insufficient data-driven practices to determine the level of Black and African-American participation / representation in county and city opportunities. In other words, data is not being effectively collected when trying to ascertain who is represented in the participation of those opportunities. Now, consider that this is new. This is first in what is being done here. So just to a large extent, the data is not going to be there. So what that tells us is, in our recommendation is, as we move forward, it then says to the city and to the county, you have to begin to collect this type of data to ensure representation. How can you assess representation? How can you ensure access? How can you ensure knowledge if you're not collecting the data to be able to measure that to begin with? Also, insufficient data-driven evaluation of the equitable use of funds allocated to partnership programs, which means partnership programs are receiving dollars, but who is benefiting from those dollars?
Yes, yes.
So in order to determine that, again, you need data. Okay? Next, the county and city governments lack wide-scale racial equity training to create baseline knowledge, pardon me, of equitable practices. So there is training that occurs within both the city and the county governments, but how can we have a more robust training structure for staff, not just upper management or department heads, but for everyone, so that there is an understanding of what racial equity should look like across the board. The goal there is that that level of education and training should infuse their practice, right? Hopefully it's not just we learned it and we don't practice it, but we at least have to begin at the juncture of training and education. Next, there is limited affordable housing supply for purchase or rent throughout the county and city. And I'm quite sure that that's information you already know. But the issue is not so much that the county or city has created that particular harm, but it's how are they addressing that particular harm. And so that's what we looked at in that particular area. And lastly, there are subjective interpretation of human resources, hiring and promotion processes that has enabled covert, latent, and explicit biases. And that has to do within the internal working of the city and county government, and we'll explore that a little bit later. So before we jump into economic development, I'll pause right there, just allow another opportunity. Any questions? Because this is where the ride is gonna go. We're about to be on this train for a little while.
Okay.
Yes.
Tiffany Devereaux, just a point of clarity. So this insufficient data is based on 2020 to 2023.
Yes.
So this is after the equity priorities that has been established within the city and the county based on the 2036 plan. There still hasn't been any data collected around racial demographics since 2020 or between 2020 and 2023.
To the extent of the items that we've looked at, there's been insufficient data on the racial demographics. So I'm answering your question, but not to the specificity of information that you may have, but based on the information we've collected.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
MZ Yehuda, just a question about, you had 4 essential questions.
Mhm.
And I wanted you to unpack access, right? Operationalize that. What does that actually mean?
Okay, access, for example, the question is, what does access look like from the conference when we talk about opportunity, representation, knowledge, and access? Access may be, if someone goes to fill out a form and the form is difficult to fill out, it's asking you questions that you cannot answer. That can be an access issue. Access can be the amount of steps that you have to go through in order to get something. So let's say there is a procurement process, and I'm being totally hypothetical. This is not real. Hypothetical, right? I'm really just making something up to give you an example. If you have to go through a procurement process, but there's a requirement for you to have this document and that document and this document, and by the time you get to the 10th document, you're going to give up, right? It's the process, right, is not as accessible. So, for example, in the state of South Florida and Florida, where I'm from, with one of the procurement processes there, the cities of Miami-Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County and cities have all created a one procurement process system that if you sign up for that, it triggers to all of the cities and the counties, and all your information is duplicated. So you don't have to go fill out 30, 40, 50, you don't have to go fill out 90 applications in order to be registered with the procurement offices. So that's an access issue, right? How do we simplify the process for you to enter the game, for you to enter or gain access to that particular resource? From a health and wellness standpoint, if you go to a clinic and they have documents for you to fill out, and you have to show proof of this and proof of that, and you're trying to get service, that becomes an access issue.
I'm thinking of like levels of access, because you may be able to get through one door and then there are 10 more behind it.
Correct.
So how do you account for that when you look at representation or opportunity minus access? How do you gauge that level of access?
When you have, say the question one more time.
So you have the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
and you get to the front, to the first door. You may get to the second door, but there are 5 other doors behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're going through each door, more doors are being added. How do you determine the level of access? How do you measure the level? Are you measuring the level of access, or is it just?
What I hear you ask it is, how many steps are too many steps? And how many steps are the appropriate amount of steps? Right. Well, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. And we're looking at, we looked at, for example, the grant process. You know, there's, you fill out the paperwork, you submit it, there's a review team, people give you back, there's feedback on it. So we didn't find that to be problematic, but we do wanted to at least know that there was access and there's a process in place and the process seems equitable, right? We had a larger, in that specific example, we had more concerns about knowledge, which was, are people aware that these grant opportunities are there? What are you doing to inform the public? So it depends on what we're seeing, where we may determine that there's some type of issue that needs to be addressed. Okay. All right. We're going to go on the train now. Okay. So this here just shows you for economic development, the data that we receive from both the county and the government. This is just a snapshot of it. Nothing to really dive into. We review, like I said, 1,000 documents, so we received a lot of information. So this is just showing you some of the information that we received. What stood out in this particular study that we want to share with you today is that there's persistent utilization of repeat vendors, which limits opportunities for minority-owned businesses. When you look at funds under 5,000 that's coming through the procurement process, which gives a lot of discretion to whoever that procurement officer may be, you'll see that 72% of those funds over the last 3 years or 72% of those contracts under $5,000 have been awarded to the same vendor with 2 or more purchase orders. Okay. When you look at rates under $30,000, you see 62% of that repeated. Under $90,000, 66%, and over $90,000, you see 74%. Vendors are receiving repeat businesses, so that may mean other vendors are not having the same opportunities. However, as we research through this, including reading up on the city's disparity study, for example, what you find is that there is a readiness challenge. The city and the county and the residents, business owners, there is a point that there has to be some larger conversations, because you have the city and procurement needs, but then you also have an issue of small business readiness. So how do you address the fact that you have opportunities, but then you have a business or businesses that are not prepared to do the type of work or the level of work that the city or county may need? So one of the recommendations that we developed was what we call a utilization and industry dashboard. Now, to our knowledge, this is not something that is widespread, but we do think that this is one of the more innovative recommendations that can come out of this process. A utilization and industry dashboard is a user-friendly online portal where it allows you to see all of the procurements that have gone out, services that's been purchased, goods and services that's been purchased. So let's hypothetically give it a timeline. If there's a 5-year timeline that I can go back and I can see all of the dollars spent on goods and services using the standardized commodity codes, then I know where and what the city and government is buying. If I know what they're buying, I can now do one of 3 things with my business. I can pivot, I could expand, or I could create a new business that provides that particular service. I can get certified in that particular area. So if my business is installing projectors and the city only does that once a year, and the contract for that is only, $2,000. I'm being hypothetical here. And that's what your business does, is we install projectors. And you're looking for contracts in that way, you're not gonna find it. You follow me? So, but what if there's an opportunity for the city and the county to have a system that shows you what those trends and analysis have been, so now you know how to develop your business?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's what that particular recommendation is, a utilization and industry dashboard looking at the commodity codes. There are some benefits to that. One, there's enhanced transparency. The dashboard promotes transparency by providing entrepreneurs with clear and accessible information. You get to see the historical data and trends like I just mentioned. And as a business owner, you get to have some strategic decision-making based on the information that you're seeing. Something like this can help to improve the opportunities and the knowledge within the government. So going back to the compass, we see what the opportunities are, and now I know about them. At this point in economic development, I'm going to ask Ms. Adrian Hibbert to come on up, and she'll finish the rest of the economic development information.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello.
So to continue where Dr. Carter left off, one of our findings was race-conscious policies. The city of Asheville has conducted 2 comprehensive disparity studies, one presented in 2018, analyzing years 2012 to 2017, and one presented 2023, so last year, analyzing years 2018 to 2022, allowing for race-conscious procurement policies. Now, Buncombe has not conducted a disparity study and therefore cannot allow for race-conscious policies until a study is completed. Now, for the recommendation is conduct a disparity study for inclusive procurement practices in Buncombe County. Now, that just means Buncombe County should conduct a disparity study. Governmental entities across the country authorize disparity studies in response to the City of Richmond versus J.A. Crossan Company and subsequent cases to determine whether there is a compelling interest for the creation or continuation of remedial procurement programs based upon race, gender, and ethnicity. And it is true, we do need procurement processes, programs that help minority companies, businesses. Some examples are Durham County in North Carolina is currently doing a disparity study. Wake County is also doing a disparity study. These are clickable links. And then Hartford County, Maryland has done a disparity study, just to name a few. Now, some of the benefits for a disparity study, which include evaluating historical procurement data to identify disparities, developing clear and measurable race-conscious goals and policies based on study findings, and formulating strategies for actively including minority-owned businesses through mentorship programs, capacity building initiatives, and targeted outreach efforts. Our third recommendation is we want to encourage the establishment and development of a Black Chamber of Commerce that is created by business leaders as a nonprofit organization. This would be a business community-led initiative. Now, by establishing a Black Chamber of Commerce, that would provide a direct hub of Black businesses in Buncombe County and the city of Asheville, offering a space for collaborative business development needs and opportunities, encompassing entrepreneurial support services, networking, collaboration, access to resources, and capacity building, which will have a positive impact on utilization, representation, and access. There are many Black Chamber of Commerces across the country. I feel that with as many Black businesses that you guys have within the city, that I think they're just looking for a place to commune and having a hub for if there's a product or a service that you offer and you're not trying to sell to the government, just knowing that other people can come there and support you. You can network with other businesses, you can partnership with other businesses. That would actually create a safe space for just access and opportunity with each other. Now, the benefits for Buncombe County Black Chamber, like I said, It just needs to be created. I believe it would be best if a few of you come together, talk about it. It's a nonprofit organization. It'll create jobs. It'll do so much for the community. I do know that Black Mountain has a Black Chamber of Commerce, a Chamber of Commerce as well. So you do have separate Chamber of Commerces within Asheville, and this one would be a great addition. And our next IFA is education.
So those are the three recommendations that we have coming out of economic development. As it relates to the Buncombe County Black Chamber of Commerce, do understand, just to be clear, that type of initiative is initiated by a community business leader. It is a nonprofit, but what that does is it gives you a hub in which the city and the county governments can have a direct place where they can find local Black businesses. All right, our next category is education. I'll give you some time to get to that page. I believe it was the first one on your page. All right, here is Jennifer Felton to talk to you about education.
All right, take a few moments. I know y'all got a lot of things floating around in your brain. Chamber of Commerce, all kinds of information, right? So I am an educator. So if any educators in the room, you already know how this is about to go, right? So my goal is always to take the information and translate it into digestible bites so that we can then do something with that information. So on the screen, you see this lovely picture here. And we are about to share a lot of data, a lot of information. But when it comes to education, I want you to look at the data. But behind the data, I also want you to think about children that you know. Because without looking at the children, then what are we doing? And when you put the data, you say, okay, how has this impacted Johnny? How has this impacted Tamika, Keisha, Sean? So I want you to think about children as we go through this data. So I'm gonna click through. Basically, we collected a lot of data, a lot of information. We looked at your grants. We looked at the people who are submitting the grants. We looked at the reports. That's basically what it's saying. However, one of the things we began to look closer at is the dollars. How is the money being used, right? And so what we want to say is, good job at making education a focus, right? You have applied your money to it. And so here in Buncombe, we see where early childhood education has been a priority for you. We can see that, right? We can see that is a commitment for you because you're applying your money there. As we continue to look in the city of Asheville through the strategic partnership grants, same thing. We can see that you are applying your dollars there, right? And as we continue to dig, you also have this vision of equitable and diverse communities by eliminating the opportunity gap in our school systems and increasing access to quality schools and other educational resources by fostering economic mobility. You do that through education. So we see where you're doing that, right? You're putting money there. But this is where, in the spirit of ceasing harm, we have to begin to ask tough questions. We have to begin to say things like, but is it making a difference? And so when we looked at the data, we could not clearly determine if Buncombe County early childhood grant dollars are improving the developmental milestones of students. When we looked at it for the city of Asheville, we could not really see if the strategic partnership grants are closing the opportunity gap. We see where you're doing the work, but we can't see the things that are hidden. And so we acknowledge that the grant fund is new, but we have to ask the difficult questions right now in order to cease the harm, right? Let's continue. So we came up with a couple of recommendations. An easy one as far as early childhood education is standardize it. We need some type of assessment tool so when these programs turn the data back over to us, we can see if they're making growth, if they're making improvement. And if they're making improvement in this area, great, let's move on to the other area. If we're not making improvement in this area, then what do we need to do differently? But it's hard to see that. And so that is why we recommend using some type of universal assessment tool to make sure that your money is giving you the results that you want. Another recommendation is to use a subject matter expert. And so the reason we say use a subject matter expert is you're putting the money out there. There are people doing the work, but you want to kind of make sure you're doing the right work, if that makes sense. Maybe you're putting money towards, Dr. Carter likes to use buying pencils or whatever. Maybe that's not what we need to be putting money towards. Maybe we need money over here. And so a subject matter expert can say, yes, we know this was an amazing project and it sounds amazing, but that's not what we need in our community. We need somebody who can look at the data and know what is going to give you the most bang for your buck. And then just data collection.
Yes.
When we look at the data, it's kind of hard to assess the effectiveness of some of the programs. And so this is just a couple of the recommendations that we are putting out for education. Let's keep talking. When we look at the data and the data is missing, we can only look to the data that came back from the school system, right? And so this is what we see. And when you look at this data, remember what I said, I want you to think about what? Children. So you have 7% in Buncombe County. You have 7% of your population is students of color, Black students, 20% in Asheville. But what is happening with their reading and their math proficiency? We're putting money there, but is Johnny getting the bang for the buck? Does that make sense? And so they're going to talk to you later about law enforcement and things of that nature, but we see the numbers, but I want you to see children. All right, let's keep moving. So some of our recommendation would be, let's look at school resource officers and let's require some type of cultural sensitivity training for school resource officers in response to the disciplinary referrals. Because all of this still comes back to early childhood education. If you make sure that students are getting the support that they need early on, it reduces this. But that's another conversation. Pursue legislative changes. We want you to take control over this and require cultural sensitivity training for your faculty. Require culturally relevant pedagogy and textbook selection. Sometimes students act up because I just don't want to read this. This does not relate to me. I don't want to read about another dead dog. I want to read about some things that look like me, sound like me. I want to see myself in the content. And maybe I won't be putting my head down. And maybe Ms. Johnson won't need to have to call somebody, but that's another concept. Require core subject faculty members to reflect the student demographics. So this is, again, some of the recommendations that we've come up with. And so I'll pass it over to Housing. Oh.
Thank you, Jen. With regards to the education recommendations, the information that you see, especially with this last particular recommendation here, during the Reparations Summit, George Fotherly mentioned the need for sometimes for legislative changes to occur in order for harm to be stopped. And so one of the things we talked about was in light of the funding that comes from the county to the school board, which is practice, but are there some ways that the county, in an effort to cease harm, can have an impact with the dollars that it gives to the school board? And that's what those recommendations are based on. How can we ensure training? How can we ensure that faculty members represent the students that they're teaching? And how can we also ensure that the textbook also represents or reflects the student demographics? So those are the recommendations that we have for education. Now, we're actually supposed to do something between each transition. We're supposed to say it's not the problem that counts. It's a solution. So we missed it for economic development. So we have to go back and then we're going to do it one more time. It's not the problem that counts. It's a solution. So I want to bring up to you Beverly Cooper, who's going to go through our housing findings and recommendations.
Good evening.
As Dr. Carter said, my name is Beverly Cooper, and I was responsible for conducting the research for the housing portion of the Cease Harm audit. Of course, I can't take credit for doing it alone. I had a very good team in Ashley Jameson, who isn't with us this evening, and also Mr. Jonathan Moses, who's in the back of the room. So let's talk about housing. We know that affordable housing is an issue, not just for Asheville or Buncombe County, but all around the United States of America. We found where rents are increasing, it's harder for people to afford homes because of rising interest rates and wages are stagnant. But we look at housing as a social determinant of health. So we just had Jen come up here and talk about education. Kids can perform better in school when they have safe and secure housing. And people's personal economies are better when they have some place to stay and they feel safe and they feel secure. And then Ashley will come up and talk about health and nutrition. You know, if you have some place to live, a warm, safe environment, then you're more in a better position to buy food and prepare healthy options for your family. So housing as a whole is a very, very important thing that helps people improve their qualities of life. So as previously mentioned, we looked at data from various departments within the county and the city of Asheville. And our initial findings, what we found is that the Black home ownership gap is pretty significant in this area. It's 31.9%. And that's a significant disparity of Black homeowners versus white homeowners in the city of Asheville. So it is the 151st highest among all metro areas nationwide. The Black homeownership rate in this area for Blacks and African Americans in this area is 37.8%, whereas it is 69.6% for white families. There is an overabundance of seasonal homes. So there's limited affordable housing, but there are many residents that are only occupied 40% of the year. And during that other portion of the year, they're being leased out through Airbnb or some other short-term rental programs or something. And I saw a clip on the news this morning. I didn't have time to listen to the entire segment, where there would be some discussion in an upcoming city or council meeting about short-term rentals and their impact on the community. And then we looked at rents in this area. So the average monthly rent is $1,717, which is the highest among North Carolina cities. So a lot of the information that we gathered came from HUD and other sources, that census data and other source data. So let's talk about income. So we know without enough income, it's very difficult to afford housing, whether you're looking to buy or to rent. So the area median income, and these numbers are published by HUD on an annual basis. I'll start with this by saying, affordable housing in this area, the Asheville-Bolcom County area, is the family typically has to earn 80% of the AMI in order to qualify for housing. But when you look at the Black median household income, it's $22,312 compared to $70,209 for white families, white households. The city of Asheville's median income is $64,548, and for Bolcom County is $68,019. So when we look at affordable housing at a rate of 80% AMI, at 80% AMI, it's affordable for white households. Because if their average annual income is $70,209, and if someone says, hey, in order for you to be able to afford this housing, you need to make $56,167.20. Now we know that it's also based on household composition, and what I mean by that is the number of members in the household. Even at a 50% AMI rate, it's still higher than the average Black median household income of $22,312. So that is an issue there. We're not saying that that issue was caused by the city or the county, but we know that some work must be done to also help people better position themselves so that they can have more earning power and they can earn a livable wage in this area. So how can the city and county negotiate better terms for affordable housing? So I'm not a development specialist, and I don't pretend to be, but we know that developers approach local governments all the time, and they propose their projects. Many times it's mixed use developments with some affordable housing. Well, if the affordable housing, the lowest rate to qualify for that housing in some of these development projects is 80%, then it almost completely excludes the Black and African American community in this area. And then how can the city and county expand housing inventory? So I did come across some information that's where there is a prospective project in place to build more affordable housing. And so the range to qualify for that housing would be 80% and lower. So what we would suggest is, hey, think about going to 50%, okay? And then that way it provides more of an opportunity for people who go to work every day who are not at that higher end of the income spectrum to be able to afford housing and ultimately build generational wealth for their families. Because we know that the majority of Black generational wealth is through home ownership. So during 2008 with the economic collapse, a lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their homes. And we also know that people lose their homes through not being able to pay the higher tax rates, which is another issue altogether. We didn't get an opportunity to do a really deep dive into that, but that's also an ongoing issue, which makes it impossible or difficult, I'll say, for people to own or maintain their homes. This is information here about the income limits. So for public housing or HCV housing, which most people know as Section 8, the families cannot pay more than 30% of their income to qualify for housing. So they set income limits and, their payment standards and other things like that that make those places affordable. But what happens a lot of times in some of those communities or projects, they're not always the most desirable areas to live in. Okay, and so we definitely need to look for opportunities to expand housing for people so that they can get in a better school district, or they have more access to transportation so that they can commute to and from work, or commute to and from work in time to be able to participate in their child's school programs and different things of that nature. Okay, so the very low income limits at 50% for a one-person household is $29,750, and then it goes up to $56,100 for an 8-person family. Extremely low at the one-person household level is $17,850, and for a family of 8, $50,560. And then at 80%, it's $47,600, and then it increases up to $89,800 for a family of 8. So what are our recommendations? Our preliminary recommendations is that the city and the county and the housing authority and everybody who's involved in setting housing policy come together and find a way to expand the housing inventory and to work with developers who are willing to provide some of that middle housing or lower income housing for people who may not otherwise have the opportunity to live in those areas. Develop a strategic housing plan. So housing can be a very, very complicated issue because it's not always as straightforward as it seems. So you have some people who believe that housing first is the end all be all to everything. But we know that some people who are homeless or have challenges maintaining housing, it's because they have a lot of other issues for which they need wraparound services. And so all of that has to be taken into consideration when housing policy is developed. And the third preliminary recommendation is that everybody come together, everybody involved. The continuum of care. I know that I read something recently where the city and county now have a joint COC, where they will be working together to set effective housing policy. So the representatives from the city, the county, the housing authority, the COC, the Dogwood Health Trust, everybody, we would recommend that you come together and try to establish good housing policy so that all of your constituents can be served. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Beverly. It's not the problem that counts.
It's the solution.
So we're going to move into the next part of our presentation on health and wellness. There's an asterisk that I want you all to note on your paper as it relates to health and wellness. We have only done, we need to continue finalizing the other aspects of the study as it relates to health and wellness. Buncombe County has a number of health-related programs on its website. And so we need to finish our work in assessing those programs. So we are only going to focus today on two aspects of health and wellness. That is going to be the food access findings that we have and recommendations, and also parks and recreation. And then our goal is, by the time we're dealing with the finalized aspect of the study, that we'll have those other metrics related to health, health and wellness in the community over the next month and a half. So please welcome Ashley Carter to the podium.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're keeping up with everything, everybody's good, everybody eat, that's what we're talking about now. Okay, again, my name is Ashley Carter, and I'm going to discuss the health and wellness segment, specifically food access and also parks and recreation. So here are some of the data sources that I use from Buncombe County and also the city of Asheville. So let's just discuss some of the metrics. So when it comes to health food access, which is the first segment that we're going to talk about, 29% of Black households are food insecure, compared to 14% for the white households. 72% of Black residents live in public housing communities, and many others live in nearby communities. And the reason why that matters is because if you live in a public housing community, more than likely you won't have access to land. And we know that when you have access to land, you're able to do what? Grow your own fruits and vegetables, right? So, and also nearly 1/3 of the Black households in Buncombe County do not have consistent access to enough nutritious food. And the key word there is nutritious. So that means if you have access to foods that are not fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, that's not considered nutritious foods. And 31,000 residents in Buncombe County live in a food desert. Is everyone familiar with that terminology, food desert? So food desert means that you're not within a mile access in an urban area to, again, nutritious food, or more than 10 miles in a rural community. So a lot of times we're driving by food deserts and we don't know it, or we may live in a food desert and we don't know it. It's not a barren land that you may think of in your head. It's communities that a lot of us may be living in right now. And 19% of residents worry about running out of food. So I know that statistic seems low, but 1% concerned about running out of food is a concern. So looking at the findings, I can say that there's a lot of great work happening in food access. There were a lot of nutrition programs and food banks prior to the pandemic, and I know some of them have not continued. There's also a lot of pop-up community engagements. So that's with partnerships with MANA and also with the YWCA. So that is a great program, but it was hard to find out which ones accept SNAP and which ones do not. And of course, that creates a barrier, because if you're relying on, or if you primarily use SNAP, so food assistance, and you don't know what locations offer it, are you going to be willing to take a bus or walk to this location and you're not sure if you can use your benefits? More than likely not. So again, that creates that barrier where you have access to it, but again, you don't really have the opportunity to take advantage of it. And we do have to acknowledge that with the urban renewal, there was a loss of land. So when you lose land, you not only lose the physical land, but you also lose the skills that you had with that land. So if you had a grandparent that was an expert gardener, and now you lost the land, you no longer have those skills because you don't have the land to practice those skills. And there's no way to really acquire that again. And also access. So it is important to note that a lot of Black communities were previously lower income prior to the urban renewal, but the main difference was having that land usage. So having your own land created a difference in food security. So again, just because you're lower socioeconomic or having lower income, that is not what creates food insecurity. It's not having that access to food. And just to highlight an area, East Riverside actually has lost 14 grocery stores since the time of the urban renewal. So that's a significant number. All right, so some more findings. The Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council was convened, including a lot of Black leaders, representatives, and also neighborhoods and community organizations. And that's very important. I myself have a nonprofit, and I know that as a nonprofit, you have to work with the government. You have to work with transportation. You have to work with different municipalities so that we're able to have change. When it comes to food security, there's a lot of intertangling, I guess we could say. There's a lot of conjoining factors, including transportation. There's also, as we talked about, education and also housing as well. So the Food Policy Action Plan was created by the city of Asheville, and that was to go along with the framework that was created from the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council. And the overall goal is to develop a long-term community food policy program with goals including food access, education, and legislation. So again, everything has to come together to create a change. So here's some of my recommendations. The first is to increase the number of indoor winter markets. Right now, in the wintertime, of course, as the weather fluctuates, a lot of farmers markets cannot stay open. So by having locations within Black communities that have fruits, vegetables readily available inside indoor locations can assist with that barrier. Also, a healthy corner store initiative. So that's happening all throughout the United States and also throughout North Carolina, where corner stores are being incentivized for having healthy food items. And last, better advertisement and tracking of those pop-up markets that have SNAP-approved opportunities. So now for Parks and Recreation, here's some of the data collection that I reviewed and for some of my findings. For Buncombe County, there's a lack of indoor facilities. So again, when it comes to winter months, that creates a barrier because there's not a space for community members to gather. Programs are heavily catered to youth, but there are some adult programs available. And also a lot of the programming for Buncombe County was outdoor programming. So during the winter, that could be problematic. And also I did see the Whole Parks Master Plan, which is a gathering of community members to help provide solutions for some of these issues. For City of Asheville, here's some of my findings. I won't read through all of them, but one of the highlights was having a community-led program, including a step class. And also there was a high percentage of residents within acceptable distance from parks, including 56% of Black residents. And there was transportation provided to youth and also a form of transportation for adults as well. And also the majority of fitness facilities are located in Black communities. So 6 out of the 8 fitness facilities are in Black communities. And there's a lot of affordable programming and pricing strategies to benefit the community as well. So my recommendations for Parks and Recreation is just improving the data collection. We see that there's programs available. So now we just need to track and see who is attending these programs, what are the demographics of those people that are coming, and also how often are they occurring. A suggestion that I have is a fitness challenge. So this is a challenge that can happen on the city or county level, and this will allow the county to sponsor a challenge where the community is incentivized for walking, biking, or participating in regular physical activity. This also can include health screenings as well and healthcare professionals connecting with the community members. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not the problem that counts.
It's the solution.
So we're gonna bring up next, Sean Walter McDaniels. Come on up, sir.
Right. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know we are, well, let me just say this to you. It's hard to come behind someone who has been talking about food and now you're probably hungry and you want me to hurry up. But I want to take this opportunity to highlight something that we all know. There is clearly nationwide a breakdown between law enforcement and the community, more specifically the Black community. And the current culture of law enforcement is facing, a microscope. We are under the microscope, if you will, and unfortunately, we're too often not willing to move past our own biases, and we're not willing to be accountable on both sides of the fence. And I want to preface this presentation with understanding the importance of a protracted conflict is not going to disappear until it is done teaching us every single thing it was intended to teach us. And unfortunately, we are using the strategy oftentimes of avoidance when dealing with this issue, this conflict. And so it continues to fuel an us versus them mentality. It fuels a dogmatic response oftentimes on behalf of law enforcement, where we pretty much go 10 toes down and become dismissive. We feel like if you're not side by side with me while we're putting our lives on the line, then you just don't understand. And oftentimes we typically lose that connection with our community, and it begins in the academy. And I can tell you that the temptation to be indoctrinated into this way of thinking that it's an us versus them, and it's fueled oftentimes by videos that remind us of our officer safety concerns and our public safety concerns, but what we need to measure, and with the same sense of urgency, is the importance of maintaining a strong relationship and building relationships with the community. We need to externalize the problem, essentially. And so I wanted to begin with that. Dr. Muwata Ashby stated, "To constrict one's mind ultimately leads to physical, mental, and spiritual illness." And as a former retired sergeant over homicide in law enforcement, right there in Richland County in Columbia, I noticed that exists within the field of law enforcement. And so I decided to do something about it, to leave it better than how I found it. So let's dive in. Here are some of the artifacts that we were able to take a look at. And law enforcement is a field, unlike most, where proficiency can basically result in a matter of life or death. A large percentage of measurable effort is spent both on public, as I stated, and officer safety. A great number of hours, training hours, is spent on making sure that we're proficient with our firearms, making sure that we know how to respond to emergencies while operating a vehicle appropriately. And so a large number of our training is, and again, I just retired, so forgive me when I say the word hour. I still feel accountable for the positive and negatives. And so here, looking at some of the metrics that the artifacts that we got from both Buncombe County and the city of Asheville, you'll notice that there's some crossover with respect to their training. The basic law enforcement training that they receive covers, again, some of those things that I mentioned to you as it relates to firearms training and officer safety and public safety concerns. And so both the Asheville Police Department and Buncombe County Sheriff Department exercise the use of onboarding and professional development training. As we can see from this, from these artifacts, they put a significant amount of focus on making sure that they're proficient in the areas of public safety and officer safety. The artifacts that were analyzed showed advanced training as it relates to the tactical response to emergency situations through the basic law enforcement training and MIST training. Law enforcement, again, included use of force, the FTO program, which is known as the Field Training Officer Program, where an officer has to actually test out of that particular program. So these were just, this was, what you see here are the artifacts that, some of the artifacts that we actually measured and analyzed. Here's some of the comprehensive training where we saw that there was some crossover training with respect to our analysis. We noticed the presence of training. Ethical policing is courageous. We thought that was the EPIC training that you see here, where it's the new movement within law enforcement in combination with the public on see something, say something. So now officers are obligated to, if you see an officer acting out of character, then we need to actually speak up and say something. All right. And so further findings discovered that we looked into what the training with Asheville Police Department was actually providing. They provided us an artifact that indicated in 2021, they received 28 hours of missed training. That's mandatory in-service training without race-related measurable training at present. 2022, out of the 40 hours of missed training that they received, 2 hours on juvenile minority sensitivity was provided. The fair and impartial policing, known as the FIP training, no measurable training in the form of pre-post tests. All right, and we'll talk about the importance of that in a little bit. So our overall concern during the findings, generally training that lack measurable outcomes can potentially lead to bias-based behaviors in the form of law enforcement practices. And so if we allow our minds to go back to the original, to the compass that we talked about, opportunity minus representation, it equals the danger of potential disproportionality. So how does that fit here for us? And so if you notice here, when you don't have a measuring tool in place for law enforcement, oftentimes they typically, when there's no way to measure some of the field interviews, also known as street encounters, right? And so how many times are individuals within a particular certain area are actually approached? It's not necessarily called out on the radio, but yet they were just sitting down on the curb with handcuffs on, right? And there's no documentation, there was nothing data driven to show that that actually occurred. That needs to start being reported and analyzed. And some of the issues in terms of biased evidence interpretations. And so biased evidence interpretations can come in the form of, for an example, if an officer is investigating a case involving some mailboxes being damaged, if the suspects happen to be white citizens, white young teenagers, oftentimes that can actually, the presence of bias can happen in the official incident reports, because had they probably looked different, it would go from a prank to malicious injury to real property, right? And so it just depends on the interpretation and the subjective danger of implicit biases if it's not measured. So here are our recommendations. Implement skill assessments in the form of measurable scenario-based recorded training and pre and post testing to capture overall proficiency and competency level. All right. APD is doing a good job by making it mandatory that their officers receive what is known as annual bias-based related training, but they need to include a measurable approach so we can actually begin to collect that data. Utilize volunteer citizens to participate in scenario-based training to encourage both peer and citizen review and ensure transparency. This is happening in other jurisdictions where we're seeing great results and the true collection of data when it comes to what real-time capture of microaggressions, right? So when we first started entertaining this whole issue of dealing with the absence of data-driven practices, the first question that came up was, how do you actually measure or capture implicit bias in someone? And so that's when we developed the use of recorded devices. And so an example of that would be if now in some of the training, in responding to a civil disturbance between an employer, a married couple, and their housekeeper, they would actually, we record the officer, we use regular citizens so that they can get the real life engagement. Oftentimes we use our own fellow officers, and let's just be honest, training is not, for some people it's a day off, right? And so we're not gonna actually go hard in training. And so we have to kind of like utilize citizens to help us keep the value of it. And so in that same scenario, we'll notice based on the recording, collecting that particular data, we'll notice that if it's a civil disturbance with that, where there's an employee and housekeeper that doesn't want to leave, we'll have a white male, a black female, and a black male. And we'll watch that officer's microaggressions through the recorded data to see exactly how are they actually engaging these individuals upon sight. Right, and so in this particular situation, the housekeeper is not one of the females, a white female or the black female. In fact, it's the white male. But if we see an officer, naturally, their natural go-to is to make some assumptions based on their implicit biases. Well, we want to measure that, and then of course train accordingly. And so oftentimes within law enforcement, in closing, we typically focus on the branches. We want to watch a video here and there that pop up, but the underlying, and when these complaints happen, you can guarantee that the first thing that's brought into question is the training and how is it being measured, right? And officers know this to be true nationwide. We are not measuring training like we should outside of firearms training and the use of an emergency vehicle. We actually, you can lose your job. Physical PT training, sure, you can lose your job. But when it comes to capturing the presence of implicit biases within training, that is the fueling bloodline, if you will, as it relates to some of these other improper findings that we have. My partner, Ricky, if you're needing those metrics, he definitely, Ricky, can you raise your hand? He will be able to provide that for you as it relates to stops, traffic stops, searches, what have you, and what those numbers look like for both Asheville Police Department and Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Carter, if I can, time check is 7:25.
So we have 5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes, but I just wanted to pose to the group, if you all would be open to allow Dr. Carter and his group to finish and maybe extend by 10, 15 minutes. We do still have one more agenda item, which is the community engagement discussion. And we also still need time for public comment, but I just want to pose that to the group. If you are in favor of extending maybe 10 to 15 minutes, please raise your hand. All right, that is majority. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McDaniels. And we only have 2 more components to go through, which I'll do quickly, dealing with the internal workforce and the equity offices, and then we'll open up for any questions that you may have. In addition to looking at the Big 5 IFAs, we also looked at the internal operations as it relates to the workforce and the equity offices for both the city and the county. And this is just some demographic information here. Buncombe County services 8,000 applications, receives 8,000 applications annually. They hire anywhere from about 350 folks and have about 1,700 total positions. Currently, they have 1,663 employees across their 31 departments. And when we look at the demographic breakdown, again, going back to representation, one of the areas that we did see a gap is that there are opportunities, if you will, for more African-American employees to be in positions of leadership. On the positive, the overall employee demographic is consistent with the county's racial makeup, similarly with the city as well. The county the county's hiring manager must complete professional development training. Started in 2022, they have exit surveys and in-person exit interviews. They also have stay surveys. Stay surveys is, finding out if there's a high transition or turnover in a particular area. They talk with those particular department heads to develop some kind of strategy. And they also have a policy writing process, which includes an equity and inclusion revision or review. They have interview panels, but where we did see that there is an opportunity for growth within the county is that their policies needs to be updated because they have some inconsistent processes in how folks are interviewed and are decided to be promoted within the organization. And those inconsistencies, which means you have one practice which is different from another manager's practice, can lead to covert, latent, implicit, and explicit bias in the hiring and promotion process, especially as it specifically impacts African Americans or Black people. So similar data here we have for the city of Asheville, which has around 1,290 positions, and approximately 1%, 14 of Black African American employees are in management roles, making them the highest number of non-white employees in management role. But again, you can see you only have 1% of Black or African Americans who are in a management role. So there are some opportunities there as well. The city's department heads have received training from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, but that's just the department heads. The city does not require training for hiring managers as part of its hiring process, which means they're trained before entering panel discussions and reviews of applications, rather, that comes in. The county has a training for their hiring managers. It appears that the city does not. And there are currently no standard guidelines, similarly, for panel interviews that lead in department leaders to establish objective requirements and processes. So just like you see the same thing similar with the county. So we've developed some recommendations for both the county and the city, and some that are mutual. One, developing a hiring manager and interview panel policy and procedures, and specifically with the county updating theirs. And our firm is looking at some strategies to recommend to them. To conduct a comprehensive data collection of key HR metrics, human resource metrics, again, looking at data collection. And to conduct an annual employee engagement survey. I want to say their plans. I believe the city, and I may be mixing this up, but Brenda or Rachel, you can correct me. The city or the county is actually starting one in 2024. That's the county? Okay. So there are plans to start engagement surveys, to start getting feedback from staff. Again, another data collection approach.
The city is looking at that too.
It's the city? Okay.
I don't know about the county.
County, okay, all right. Just to clarify, since our conversations, there have been plans to get started with engagement surveys. And I know that one of them are starting as soon as next month, because that's been a conversation that's been in the works. Also, develop a women's focused leadership program to support the advancement of women of color. That is also a recommendation that we have for the city of Asheville. Okay. We didn't say it. I am so sorry. Oh, y'all.
I was gonna remind you.
Right? It's not the problem that counts.
It's a solution.
So this is our final area that we looked at: equity, inclusion, and human rights. So the city of Asheville has the Equity and Inclusion Office, and Buncombe County has the Equity and Human Rights Office. So again, data that we received from them. And when we looked at Buncombe County, they have an equity and inclusion work group. They also have affinity groups. They have mandatory 8-hour racial equity training for department heads and supervisors. And they also have a pretty robust racial equity action plan that has 7 focus areas with some key strategies that they've been tracking. The city of Asheville also has an equity dashboard. They are currently finalizing their racial equity plan. They have racial equity courses, but they're not mandatory for all staff to complete. And as of our recent check, between 20 and 2021 is when we saw the largest spike of racial equity training. But up to this date, only about 1.6% of the staff have completed internal racial equity training. They also have a policy analysis and equity team, which is really good. That means it's a team that's put together to review policies for equity purposes to make sure that they're equitable policies. So far, they've reviewed 3, and we're talking about how do they develop a timeline to review policies on an ongoing basis. So our recommendation for them was to collaborate with the Human Resource Department to conduct an annual comprehensive data collection of key employee metrics, which is, you saw with the internal workforce, the same metric to collaborate, and to also collaborate with HR to conduct an annual employee engagement survey, again, connecting back with the internal workforce recommendation. And also for the city to require diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging professional development training for all staff, beginning with executive leadership, in addition to the GEAR training that they've already done. As far as our next steps, we are, after today, which with this preliminary presentation on our preliminary findings, we're then going to engage the city and county in some review meetings to continue looking at our findings and our recommendations so that we can begin to narrow them down and streamline what needs to be done. Then we'll look at our final report and go into our final presentation. So again, this is the compass that you all saw that's been guiding our work, as we look at opportunity, representation, knowledge, and access.
It's not
Not the problem.
It's the solution.
One more time.
It's not the problem that counts, it's the solution.
So we've reached the point of having questions. Ms. Patricia, do you want to tell us how you would like to do that, considering the time constraints?
Yes, so we are very, very limited. So first and foremost, this is a shameless plug for the survey, because we will not be able to have all our questions answered, but for any questions that we do not get, please, we'll make space for you to put it into the survey after the meeting. But if we can take it by the
IFA.
areas, the IFAs, and we'll just take one question if you have it from each group, so you get a full representation of questions.
We started off with economic development. Are there any questions regarding economic development? Yes, sir.
Jesse Ray. I was intrigued by your small business readiness icon, and it generated 3 questions. In your data analysis, did the city and county provide you with an inventory of Black businesses that qualify to do business with them?
I wouldn't look at it as necessarily qualified. You can stand up, Ms. Hibbert, but we were provided their ABI vendor list. Go ahead. You could.
So the city did provide the Asheville Business Inclusion enterprise list. So this is a list that they've collected for people who are certified, City of Asheville certified, HARP certified, WBE certified, Black business certified. So all of the different ethnicities and different minority groups. Within that list, these people register to become certified with the Business Inclusion Office to do business with them. So they did provide us a list. Are you asking in reference to?
He asked if there was readiness attached to that. I could tell you that we can't, based on that information,
Based on the information,
it wouldn't tell us if they're ready or not.
If they're ready.
Yes, well, my other point on that was how they characterized, were they characterized as African American or minority? Because a minority, can that not be a white woman?
Yes. So WBE is a woman-owned enterprise, which in North Carolina is considered a white woman-owned business. And Black business enterprise, Black business, Hispanic business enterprise, Hispanic business. So it is categorized by the minority.
Right. And so then it would show the percentage of Black businesses as opposed to any of the other categories.
Yes.
And my second was, part to that, did you ascertain a contract list of the various areas in which they seek contracts, and would that list be available to this committee and to the public?
We did receive a list of contracts that were procured through the ABI department and office. The lists are within different departments within the city. And as far as what the contracts and what they procure, the goods and services, there are several different categories: general services, professional services. So they're categorized, but they don't tell us specifically what it is that they're looking for, because it is categorized the way that the city categorizes. So if they're looking for someone to do, to put up a fence, there's not like a fence category. There's a landscape category. It's categorized by general services, professional services, product services, goods.
And then finally, and I don't know how, for entrepreneurs to be in a position to be vendors with the city or county, they gotta have access to capital.
Yes.
How can government enable the city, how can the city and the county enable access to capital?
Access to capital has many different pathways that you can get a loan, you can get a grant. There are for-profit grants that you can apply for. The city creating those pathways is going to be a larger conversation, because if you need capacity building, or if you need training, or if you need employees, every aspect of access to capital is different for every business. Every
Ms.
business
Hibbert,
doesn't need the same thing.
What about is it the Mountain?
The Mountain Capital.
Mountain
Community Capital.
Community Capital Fund. There is Carolina Small Business Enterprise. They do provide loans. There's Mountain BizWorks that does provide loans. But as far as what you're looking for is, you have to determine how much capital you need, and then what the avenues are to gain that access. Business readiness, business legitimacy, all of those things come into play.
And so is that what you shared, is that going to be a part of your report so that we can see and follow up on those areas?
Access to capital, access to financing is actually one of our metrics. It wasn't mentioned here tonight. We have assessed the city and the county's ability to provide access to financing. It will be in the report. It just wasn't shared tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. We have time for probably one more question. We have 5 minutes. Dee?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carter, and your team too. I wanted to just ask, since this is an internal review, and I understand that, but I'm concerned about the geographic areas, because a lot of the contractors that are larger, that get a larger dollar of procurement and contracting, are in the SMSA of maybe Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and not Asheville. Is that something that your team took a look at, was the geographic area where the Black establishments, where the professional services or contractors came from? Because I reviewed that, and it looks like the larger dollars do come out of other SMSAs.
I can't say that we actually did. I don't recall doing that.
The
Ms. Hibbert.
disparity study.
It has a home location, and I think, for instance, professional services was rendering the largest dollar share, and there was an outfit from Charlotte that the water department engaged. So I was just wondering if, look at the geographical area where these firms hail from was something, because it concerns me that we're growing at other companies outside that don't pay taxes here, where our locals don't get any access at all. So I'm really concerned about that. And another issue is the fact that all of this is internal. There will be an external assessment done of sub-awardees and subcontractors and nonprofits that have provided technical assistance and other services to the city of Asheville and Buncombe County respectively that have been paid. Is that correct?
That's been, there are two parts to that on this second question. Where we've looked at the prime contracts and whoever the prime is, and they've looked through their process of that. Now, who they subcontract to and that particular demographic information, I'm not entirely sure if we've received that level of data. and if we're privy to that much information.
But the sub-awardees that are nonprofits that are providing these services, I've heard the economic development facilitator from your crew said something about, mentioned names like Mountain Biz Cap and those. But then there are some of us who provide this that were left out and have been excluded from being competent technical service providers. How do we, that's exclusion. So how do we cure that exclusion? Because we truly don't participate at all in the process.
Well, I know that there are two things that's going on in the feedback that I've received. My understanding is you have a prime contractor who dollars may be going to Black business enterprises, but I'm not too sure how much of that is being tracked. So that goes back to a data issue. If it's a matter of having firms or companies that can provide those services and not receiving those dollars, that's where one, having that utilization list, two, having a chamber, which is why we looked at those types of recommendations to say, how can we create a space that allows government to go to in order to be able to identify where those Black businesses are and to also assist with their readiness. Thank you.
We got time for one last question. MZ, your hand been up for a while.
Yeah, just one, real quick. Well, when you provide the final report, will you also provide expected outcomes based on the implementation of the recommendations?
Those are pretty much going to always wrap around the outcome of if there's a gap there that of a service that's not being provided, then that becomes an opportunity. If there is lack of data to show representation, then the data is, then collect the data or create pathways for there to be more representation or campaigns to raise awareness or change systems so that you can have more access in it. So the outcomes are always going to be tied to what you see on the compass on the screen.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You all, I just want to acknowledge that this group is here because, or the Carter Development Group is here. I just want to remind y'all that this is one of your recommendations and this is what it looks like put into action. And so I just want to just elevate that because your work and what you are doing, it will lead to outcomes, even though it's a hard journey and it's an up and down experience, but your recommendation is what brought them here. And I think they did a fabulous job. So one more time for the Carter Development Group.
All right, we are on to our next agenda item.
Can I add one thing? Any notes that you all have written on your sheets, if you can turn those in to us, because we do want to note the questions that you may have.
They may have notes that they want to keep, but the questions is what we need. Is there anyone who's okay? I want to make sure y'all are okay with turning in those sheets because there may be notes. You want to keep them? Okay. So we do want to get the Carter Development Group, the questions that you all have that wasn't answered. The best way to do that will be through the survey. If not, please send us an email and we'll make sure that we get it to the group. Questions?
When is their final product coming out? When should we expect?
June, right? Or is it April? April or June?
When is
the
what?
final report?
The final report.
Report is in February, not April.
The final report is February.
I was trying to get the February. No, so it's February.
It's the end of February.
Are they presenting at the next meeting with that, or? is it-
We're working on that.
Okay.
To bring you back some
Okay,
information.
we're gonna go ahead and move forward because we have the community engagement discussion, so I'll let DeWanda take over.
So we have been talking about community engagement a lot, just about every meeting. So the question was posed, well, the statement was made that if we wanted to look at community engagement, that we needed to come up with a plan, of what that could look like for this process. And the community engagement will mainly, through discussions and agreement with, city and county staff, the purpose is to get feedback on our recommendations. That's the sole purpose we have identified. We all agree. We need as much feedback and input on these recommendations as possible. And so I have been working for a little second with RJC on developing a presentation and a proposal for what community engagement could look like from now to the end of this process.
Is it possible that we could also provide an opportunity for the 7 community groups? We've allocated $250,000 to each one of the 7 community associations or neighborhood groups, and it was kind of conjectured that community engagement would be best, even the housing authority. There are 6 legacy Black neighborhoods, and to funnel those funds through them because they are directly on the ground with the community. So I would want to entertain a discussion with that, if that's possible.
Yeah, we can definitely entertain that discussion, but right now it's time for the presentation for RJC. And please definitely put that in the survey as well. RJC, would y'all like to come up?
We don't even get a clap when we go.
Roxy has it. Roxy?
While we wait for that, I wanted to say shout out to the group that came in. As someone who was in PBA class of 2014.
Yes, speaking of my.
I wanted to say thank you to the group that came in and did the actual presentations today. Your work is really dope. Even if you're not done with it yet, I know talking to some of the people and seeing some of the faces of people who've been in this for like a decade, and a lot of y'all been in this for multiple decades. It was a lot of, that's what we've been seeing. So I appreciate you all for actually coming and doing that work, especially as an impacted Black male who is from the projects. So thank you. So quick short, you all already know about the RJC. We're not gonna make this too in-depth. I did wanna do a little bit of context setting and create some space for our director to do the same. So how we got to our initial proposal was the RJC had built a natural, intrinsic, altruistic relationship with the CRC, mostly off of relationships and actually in the community, that built a nice collaboration that just was fruitful. We actually are a part of 2 different coalitions locally outside of our own, Buncombe County Community-Based Violence Prevention, which has over 16 different groups that are working together, in addition to United for Youth, in addition to our own coalition with some 19 orgs, and I don't know how many other folks. And so we are a nice point to not try to say we can do everything, but we can connect to those who need to be connected to through a robust, diverse system. And so I wanted to take the time to say, I apologize for how our initial relationship began. That wasn't on our part entirely, and it wasn't on your part entirely. It was a lot of miscommunication. I'll let you. All right. Kosher. So quick intro to the RJC. The Racial Justice Coalition started as a program that was under the YWCA. And it was through the leadership of our PD and a lot of really tough conversations that the Brave Coalition was decided to be created. Initially as something to help communicate between the Black male population or the Black population and the police force, particularly after we had a lot of issues. And we had a gentleman who was beaten at 3 o'clock in the morning from jaywalking after getting off from work. And so this need was there. A lot of developments occurred. And we got to this point now. The core values that we make sure that we are always trying to embody, there's a lot more that you can see on our actual website, but I think these 2 really capsulize it a lot. One is we believe that our community must commit for reparations for Black people, and we believe that none of us are free until all of us are free. And within that, we think that when we say that, and we say that some 70% of us live in those places, like I did in PBA in my family, that's still, we gotta have some strategic engagement with them. And we can't just say, okay, well, cool, I have some earned affluence and now I have some perimeter freedom, but it takes those voices, those narratives, all of us having that level of connectivity. And I'll skip over the brief history because we're already into this a lot and you guys have seen our faces a lot. So you can follow up with us if you want more context. Rob, is there anything you want to add on the history?
I would just like to remind the commission that the reason why we were in the streets is because of that 72% of the population that is resides in public housing, and we really need to bring them into this process and approximate to support y'all and to also realize the work that you all have done, but to also give them voice and agency. I myself, in my own opinion, I don't feel like they've really been involved, and they have not been engaged at all.
So briefly, where we're at now, we have our umbrella work. The RJC includes us as the core team members, our coalition supporters, board members, and everyone else who actually comes in and engages. Our EBB, our Every Black Voice campaign, our EBB, consisted of two basic parts. Our Walk the Walk campaign, where before I got here, there was a lot of dope people who did some really amazing work. Some of them are in the room, and actually went out and did a lot of on the ground talking to people, getting those narratives. And then second was the Every Black Voice campaign, which initially started with the ambitious goal to interview, I think it was 10,000. Didn't actually reach our goal, but that's a part of actually assessing and giving that space and saying that we need to reassess and sometimes do things better. And last, we have GAP. And with GAP, we have two core components. One is our volunteers who attend public meetings and other spaces that have pertinent information related to the Black community. And the second is our RJC core team who actually meets with or takes in that information, creates reports, and makes that reports available to a group of Black leaders who meet on a weekly basis, taking that information and then assess what should actually go out. And that way acting on behalf of the community will. We have a couple of commission members who've been engaged with this process throughout and some other community individuals. So this is our current operations and the operations that allow for us to work very well with you before. And again, that's just how we see ourselves placed between Black community and these systems that we actually have access to. Brief achievements today: maintain and support the development of a local and regional coalition. Like I said before, I'm currently serving as a steering committee member for Buncombe County Community-Based Health Response to Violence, CHDP. This is a joint initiative between our county, again, another municipal situation in which the local government is working with community-based orgs to write for some 2.8 million, 80% of which is going directly to community. That other 20% is being used somewhat for salary. We had our kickoff event in December. We're gonna have we're planning down our actual campaign for the whole year, and we'll be able to get that scheduled to you all hopefully by February. And that will be some potential for some collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I've looked at was for our first meeting, we have to make some time for CRC. If you all don't want it, we'll take it as RJC, but that is there for you. Second is the United Way for Asheville United for Youth Network. I serve as a board member, but additionally as an org, we serve as a core member on planning out this actual network to actually ensure that all of our youth by 2036, whether they're going to college, they're getting a GED, whatever it is, they have the resources to be successful with that. We've been present in this coalition through all of last year, did a lot of time planning and other fun things, and continue to actually support and make sure to open up those doors to the community. Last is New Capitalism and Blueprint, or this is actually three. New Capitalism is a broad-based national coalition we're working with to assist with creating a narrative-based approach to the actual field of philanthropy. Instead of actually asking for money from boxes that are created from European descendant people and narratives, actually coming up with those approaches. And then we have Blueprint NC, our regional coalition here at NC. Just had a meeting with them. It's been a long day. And our own coalition. Maintained, expanded our resource closet. So if you go to our website, you'll see that we have resources, toolkits for individual volunteers, activists, people trying to do things in community to connect, and working on actually getting the community calendar up. Work in coordination with local government and community-based organizations to create a safe community and develop written safety policies or safety plans. CHB kickoff, this is all about us actually showing we care about coalition. None of us win until all of us win. It doesn't matter if one of your groups or one of us actually is okay. If at the end I gotta come and take it from you to be okay, because you ain't gonna be okay. So coalition approach. How do we show that mutually we can come up? Worked in coalition with local partners to raise awareness and community support for reparations via our Reparations Are Due campaign. We've been out here kicking the pavement for you guys, helping people understand what's going on, hosting movie nights, going and having pop-ups. We've been having lunch and learns at colleges. Able to get 2,000 signees. Completed walk-to-walk campaign, phase 1 of the EBV campaign. We're going to be doing phase 2 this year. Both campaigns directly for the Black Buncombe County community. You can critique us. We're here for that, to get better and so on. I don't think you're going to find anyone else who can unapologetically talk about the Black thing here, in a better team put together to do so. Community engagement impact. Yeah, so our engagement with the Community Reparations Commission broke down barriers between the civic establishment and historically disenfranchised Black community and youth. Our community engagement events opened conversations to diverse communities and highlighted the efficacy of government collaboration with community-based organizations. This includes YWCA events, or we had a very good kickoff event back in July, monthly college lunch and learns, outreach movie events. And the important thing with these spaces is that it created that space for those Black on Black conversations, as well as those human on human conversations, where it is at the core of it, we all want the same thing. We got to play by these socio-political structures, but at the core of it, I want all of us to eat. Our GAP infrastructure convenes local Black leaders and provides them with data from Buncombe County. Our reports are guided by their discretion and are used as tools to communicate the community will. And my aunties in the city will tell you that we can be a pain. We try not to be a pain unnecessarily, but everyone has their personality and stuff. But our GAP reports is a way for the community to actually have their voice uplifted. And we're looking now to go even more to their directly impacted people to allow for them to be a part of that. And currently the RJC serves on the steering committee for Buncombe County Community-Based Response to Violence and a part of the United for Youth Coalition. With both of those, we'll have a full agenda hopefully by February, and this will be a potential opportunity for us to facilitate some engagement between the CRC and some of these other coalitions to get more input from impacted people and from the leaders who are going to be inside those spaces. I'm going to skip to, in the past, our first opportunity. The opportunity here is a collaborative approach with stakeholders, partnering with local businesses, government bodies, educational institutions, and nonprofits to amplify the reach and effectiveness of reparations. We think we can work in coalition with you all and others to help get more people aware, more people at the door, be responsive, help be able to disseminate some of the things that may not be easy to say in a way that can be communicated. Innovation and reparations. Asheville stands as a potential model for innovative approaches to reparations, setting a precedent for other communities. We definitely are. We've been in a lot of conversations where people are following us. NYC is the latest big city to actually do so that I'm aware of. And then connecting the CRC to educational institutions, cultural societies, government representatives, that's not supposed to be twice, community organizations. What's supposed to be up there is economic institutions. So that is the Mount Bisworks, the Thread Capital, those places that have subjective loans and are getting paid right now to be entry points for Black folk. But we're not talking about that and holding them accountable. Past collaboration, hosting community information sessions, partnering with YWCA, organized sessions at local colleges, regionally and locally, facilitated community healing and various other activities for holistic community support. So it was a range of information-based and actually just social cohesion. We're getting people together for the sake of being together. Future directions. We would like a commitment to continue these vital community engagements. We're seeking a collaborative approach to utilize the CRC's resources more effectively, aim to connect with and support other partners in the community, and dedicated to removing barriers faced to the Buncombe County Black community, establishing impact metrics. This is what we would like to do collaboratively. Through the conversations with the reps from the city and county, they asked us to come with this approach, and then whatever the team is, it can be some, whatever that looks like from you all, whether you have an action team or just individuals who actually care a little bit more, working with you to say, do you want to come to these events? Do you individually want to? Do you as a group want to? and continue some of the engagement we had before. I'd like for us to have better information sharing, more collaboration on our marketing and outreach, and then more of it identifying what are these barriers. Is it transportation? Are we gonna put aside 5,000 or 500 for Lyft and other vouchers? Are we gonna coordinate with other groups who have vehicles so that we can have mixed use agreements? Whatever it takes to actually identify and break down those barriers. And these are some of the indicators, we can create indicators for this at the community level, levels of participation in the community conversations, the feedback quality, diversity of voices. All of that will tell us how well we're actually doing. Levels of engagement in lower socioeconomic impacted Black community, coordination of engagement, policy influence, awareness and narrative shifting is going to be very big because for us as impacted people, it's hard for me as a Black American male to speak a narrative that's not European. And so it took encouragement from my aunties, from my uncles, from my elders and so on. And that's the same that we have to do and mirror. And there will be ongoing ones as well. So we would like this commitment moving forward, and I'll leave it here for questions, comments, or concerns.
I have, I just wanted to ask, is this the same proposal that carried with it the $200,000 budget?
No, ma'am. So as I said in the beginning, that initial proposal was a response that came from us responding to what was asked by particular elements with the CRC.
Was it an RFP put out? Oh, okay.
And that was the reason why it wasn't that way, is because it was a direct ask that came to us directly from the CRC for that. And so it wasn't necessarily that there was we came and said, we want to do this. We were asked, what would it look like to do this in this way, maximizing, actually taking the most aggressive approach to break down.
Did you know that we had put out $250,000 to 7 of the neighborhood associations from the Economic Development Group? For East End, $250,000, for South Side, $250,000 for capacity building and community engagement. Public Housing Authority, they have 3 reps on this board, $250,000 to them, to their designates. Shiloh, $250,000, Stumptown, $250,000, Heart of Chestnut, $250,000, and Burton Street, $250,000 plus about $1.3 million for an incubator. That is something that has been held by the Economic Development, IFA, I believe briefly circulated, but that is what these neighborhood groups want. They want power back in their neighborhoods, and they are on the ground doing community engagement all the time. And so I was put here, and I think everybody was put here to make sure that people can build their own capacities and don't need an outside entity to come in. Power comes from the people. So that is why we put this proposal together. So I would like the opportunity, a proffer that we should examine that. And from the aspect of these community leaders who are here and who've been appointed at neighborhood level by city council and Buncombe County commissioners.
Thank you, Dee.
Me?
Is there any more questions for
Babette got a
RJC?
question.
That's right.
Go ahead, Ms. Babette.
Don't look so determined. Help me understand something. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel on doing things, and I don't want to discount what you all are doing. But if you really were engaged with the communities, the Black communities in this area, you would know the work that they have been doing and they still continue to do after all these years. When I see this, and I'm only going on what I'm looking at on the screen of what you're doing, is what we've been doing all the time, because we work hard. And I'm in a community. I live in one of those communities. I know what it was like with Stumptown. I know what it's like with all these other communities. So why are we reinventing of the wheel and taking more time for you to come up with a project that we've already been doing? All you'd have to do is ask us. You wouldn't have to, because you go out into, you're coming out into our communities. I don't know, you've been to Shiloh, you've seen that, but you haven't got the whole perimeter of Shiloh. I don't think you know the people in the areas that you want to serve. And I think we do a big of a justice than the RJC could do. I'm not discrediting what you do and what you want to do, but help me understand, why is it right now that you want to break down some barriers that has taken the Black communities years to break down that we've already done?
Well, I'll say first, Commissioner Mays this isn't a just now for myself. When I lived in Biscuit, we organized a second chance breakfast when we found out that we were coming to school late. And even since then, over the last decade, we connected with our elders, and some elders are in the room here. And so it is an ongoing of a tradition. And it isn't that we're just now doing this. You came to some of our lunch and learns at colleges last year, and it wasn't anything of us taking away from anyone else. It just so happens that there wasn't other folks that were organizing lunch and learns and created certain spaces in the colleges in certain areas. And so I think that that's the approach that I think about it, where on the first side, it's not on my side and from the RJC, caring about breaking down Black barriers. Now, we have a team of professionals who have been trying to break down barriers wherever they were at. For me, I came from Mount Bismarck to Fiscal Legal and on track before, doing similar work in similar capacities and so on. And so that's the first part. And the second part is we're not asking for anything in addition, but a continuation of that relationship as is, which is we transparently share information. And if you would like to come to events, you come to events. If you don't, you don't. If you all want to actually provide capacity and support for breaking down barriers, you can. And if you transparently want to say no, then you don't. And we'll continue coalition work and actually breaking down those socioeconomic issues, intergenerational issues, and other things. So that's our approach on it. We're not asking for anything in addition. Came to correct some of the misguidance that might have came from how that first proposal went, and say that we would like a beneficial, productive relationship moving forward. That was more like what we had.
One final question for time.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, Joyce and Rob.
I just wanted to add on to the last comment. We're not trying to usurp your ability to engage the community. We're trying to engage sectors of the community that have not been engaged. And also collaborate with whatever communities that would like to collaborate with us as far as further engaging the community around reparations conversations. Personally, I'm in public housing all the time, and there isn't much engagement that goes on outside of what we've done. Now, you all represent the legacy neighborhoods, but I don't really see any representation of the most impacted, most disenfranchised part of the community. And that's what we're trying to address and bring them on board so we can all be lifted up. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dwayne, and then Ms. Harrison or Ms. Joyce, and then we will transition.
I want to say that there's internal work in neighborhoods that happen, but then there's a connection across neighborhoods that's not happening. So we can build capacity to connect the neighborhoods throughout the city and the county. I think that is a powerful thing that we should take advantage of, especially from the neighborhoods and the legacy neighborhoods, because we have been working in those neighborhoods consistently for a very long time. But that cross-pollination has not been sustained. And how do we create a sustainable cross-pollination using this framework and the groundwork that's happening in these neighborhoods, especially when they're being gentrified?
Mm-hmm. I know you remember how Burton Street was when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Ms. Harrison.
Okay. My question is, how many staff do you have? And how many volunteers do you have? And how are you training your staff and your volunteers to do the type of work that you're asking about?
So, do you want to answer for or?
So right now, currently, we have about 9 staff. We're in the process of hiring about 4 to 5 additional staff. How do we train them? We usually get individuals that actually reside in these communities or already have a whole lot of relationship already built with the communities. So it's not a whole lot of training needed as far as the networking part. A lot of it is just organic and authentic communication. There are some guidelines that we go by. We do have a curriculum as far as organizing and the things that we implement to get the initiatives done that we get done. And what was that? Was there another question? Oh, yes. Number of volunteers. So we have technically we have about 2,000 volunteers. Now active volunteers who actively participate, volunteers who actively participate as far as showing up and spending like actual time working on initiatives, whether it's planning, about 73. And even further actively engaged individuals that probably spend more than 8 hours a week working with the RJC. I would say, 40 to 45, I think, was the number we came up with earlier today. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did, but it didn't answer training of the volunteers. If you're talking about training the volunteers about spreading the word about reparations, we have discussed so many times in this group what reparations mean. So my question is, when you're training these volunteers to have them go out and talk about reparations to these communities, how are you going to do that, and what's the structure behind it?
We don't send white volunteers in the Black community.
No, I didn't say white volunteers. I said to send volunteers to train them about reparations.
And so I think first we do have a toolkit and we do train volunteers. And so we do have a process on. I think that he was confusing the response for training the staff with training the volunteers. So with staff, we actually do backgrounds and usually, try to get the people who have the core skills that we're hiring for the position. As it pertains to volunteers, we do have volunteer resources and actually have training for the volunteers, Black or white, before they actually go in. And that's part of what we've been discussing is the changes in that and what that would be. Now, when it comes to direct engagement, most of our volunteers' direct engagement is around a campaign. And so it will be something like Reparations Are Due, in which that's a campaign where we're not putting any extra emphasis or wording around it. We're sending them to your information as a CRC and so on and saying, okay, would you like to say that you support this in here? And so that's a strategic approach on our end, where there isn't a lot of, what I would say from my perspective, trying to teach people to go out and communicate and share all this information on things that you all are trying to figure out. But it's getting the support behind your decisions, getting the support behind what you have dissent about, if you do have dissent about things, and getting support behind the things you like. So a lot of that is email campaigns. Commission wanted extension, email saying you support X, Y, and Z. Reparations is important, and these are the core reasons why it's important. We might do some intercultural reasons and so on, but we try to avoid, from my experience, any of the trying to make the masters of it and going out and so on.
Thank you so much. We are at time, you all. I heard
Could I just make a, please?
really great conversation.
Very,
I'm so
very
sorry.
brief, very brief.
It's 8:15.
I understand.
Make it quick.
I would just like to make sure, for the record, so to speak, I would, anytime you guys are in that 72% group in our community, I would love to be able to support, walk with you, participate in any way I can. I'm not speaking for the board. I'm speaking for me. If you need me, I'll show up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. If I can, this group, the RJC, has presented an opportunity to partner, and they are asking for exactly what Mr. Wayne volunteered for. They are asking for you all to collaborate with them. They have amazing events, lots of engagement, and they can't get the word out without your involvement. So if there's anybody on this group that wants to work hand in hand with them, what they are asking for right now is for you to reach out and engage with them. There's already been conversations with city and county to support the collaboration of this work. And so the missing piece is you all. So if you all want to continue to work with them, that is
on what?
To partner with the work that they're already doing. So you, for example, what you gave, there's neighborhoods that are already doing community engagement, which is awesome. How can RJC tap into that as well?
And it finances their City of Asheville neighborhood plan.
So we'll wrap up now, and I'll turn it over to Dawana.
So the whole purpose of this and why they're here and why they have been working so diligently over the last few months is because in a previous conversation with this commission, the note that how Black people have been engaged in the recommendations, and it's bigger than the legacy neighborhoods because there's still a question in the air of demographic standing of those legacy neighborhoods today. So we have put a lot of things on the table around supporting those communities, and I'm super excited about that. But this is a collaborative initiative that we're trying to get done because we have a short amount of time. We have only been, by the county standard, approved until June to keep doing this work. And we really need to get more input from the Black community of the city and county. I think we leave that out a lot of times when we're thinking about how we invest money and funds and support. There are a lot of people who cannot afford to live in the city who was pushed out of their communities and now live in the county as well as public housing communities. So I want to be very intentional about saying what the question was in the statement from this commission. And so that it is on the record is that we come up with a community engagement plan and present it to this commission. And that we would have conversations and move forward about that. But we can all be at the table of collaborating and moving this process forward. They have did a lot of the footwork for us, and they have been supporting this process this whole time. But one thing that I push back on and question is asking another Black organization to support a initiative for free.
No, not for free.
But I'm just saying, like, we talk about money in reference to what we're investing in the legacy communities, but community engagement is important to this process. And so I also asked them to include a budget, which they did not do, but we'll work on that for their services because they are connected in a lot of the communities that's outside and inside of legacy communities. They are doing the work. They have been supporting this process from day one, and we need more engagement on our recommendations. We are in the draft stages where Black engagement is critical.
Let us, we have a budget too, and that's not to say they're excluded, but we were talking about putting that in all the legacy neighborhoods. They've had a plan, but they haven't had any money to back it up with. So I think that's something that the IFA that created that need to get together with these neighborhoods and discuss it as well, because they carry a vote too.
Okay, all right, you all, I do have to cut you off.
Just real quick.
It's 8:19.
Just real quick, we're not trying to take any money from any of the neighborhoods. We're not, like, we've been doing this. We're just trying to collaborate with you all. I don't even think we've asked for any money. We've been doing this for months. We have a report that just finished.
Want them to get money?
And would love to share the results with you about what the public housing community has to say. But anyway, y'all can decide what y'all want.
All right, so thank you all for this time. Thank you all so much. If y'all, again, in this current process, you can absolutely collaborate with RJC. You can also write them into your recommendations. So keep that in mind for continued community engagement. Next, our next meeting is February, which will, February 19th. We'll be discussing IFA draft recommendations. You all should have received communications from my team. Thank you all for who are doing the one-on-one check-ins. We don't have any public comments. And so that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn. All right, approved.
Let's go. All right, let me get these 10 cards.
All right, thanks everyone for joining. We're gonna wrap it up here. On Thursday, we're going to be doing a live coverage of the U.S. Census, the exploration of income, poverty, and educational census data for Black and white populations. That's going to be live coverage Thursday, January the 25th, 2024 at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So once again, thank you for everyone for joining. And hopefully we can support, Asheville in their reparations effort as much as we can. So on that note, everyone have a wonderful evening. And thank you once again for joining. And on that note, here, let me see. What's good information, man? What is good, family? Yes, February 19th. February 19th, yes. If anybody can show up at the next hearing in Asheville, North Carolina, to let us know what's going boots on the ground out there, we greatly appreciate it. So on that note, everyone, have a wonderful evening and check out once again, the stream. I think we're going to do it probably. Yeah, that's what we're planning on doing. So the U.S. Census is having a live stream on the 25th. So anyway, family, you guys have a great one. And on that note, as always, as we say on here, peace and reparations.
SB 490, introduced by Senator Stephen Bradford, is the first legislation that will create the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency.
The CAFA agency is a recommendation from the California Reparations Task Force final report.
Possible offices within the agency could include genealogy, strategic communications, data research collection,
as well as general counsel with social services and family affairs.
Tell your representative to support the upcoming 2024 reparations legislation.
Find them at findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov.